So essentially, it's this course is about the church as such, everything related to the church. It's a basic course, like a crash course on ecclesiology, or you may call it 101 course on ecclesiology. But it has a very specific angle to look at ecclesiology. This angle is seeing the church not only as a divine institution, which it is. The church is a divine institution. However, it's not just a divine institution. It's also a human and social reality that is susceptible, vulnerable to the circumstances, to the developments, political, social, cultural, intellectual, anti-intellectual, all sorts of developments that affect the church. They make the church changing, evolving. And we will study those evolutionary processes within the church. It does not mean that we believe that the church is not a divine institution. Again, I just want to stress it. It's important that the church as a divine institution does not change, but the church as a human and social reality, it does change. And it's equally unwise to deny that the church is has some kind of stability, some kind of immutability in it, as well as to deny that the church has some mutability, some changeability in it. So we will focus on the changeability or changeabilities of the church. We will concentrate on two particular changeabilities in the church. The first one is the changeability of the church's self-awareness. Well, it may be a bit complicated. What is self-awareness, and what does it mean? The self-awareness of the church is essentially what we think about the church as members of the church. Those who believe that they are the members of the church, they have ideas about the church. So those ideas about the church that every single member of the church, every single individual has, in mass, they constitute the collective church's self-awareness. The church per se is not a subject. It's not a subject separate from us. The church is us. And what we think about the church, we can say that it is the church who thinks about itself. And this thinking of the church about itself constitutes its self-awareness. And this self-awareness is as changeable as our ideas about the church. We as human beings, we as individuals, as church members, develop different ideas. Well, every time we think about the church, like we might have some ideas about the church like 10 years ago. Now, after many developments in church, inside us, in our life, we see how we may modify some perceptions about the church. And this is the evolution of the self-awareness of the church. It contributes, it's like a small token, a particle that contributes to a huge picture of the church's self-awareness, which changes, flashes all the time with new ideas, new insights, new perceptions that we contribute to it. Okay, so the self-awareness of the church is a huge, like a huge canvas which we paint as the church's members. We add every time new strokes, new dots, new lines to that canvas and make it changing all the time. Okay, so yes, and those ideas about the church, they can crystallize themselves, and they do crystallize themselves in ecclesiological theories, the theories that describe what the church is. Every ecclesiological theory is just a theory. It means that it rationalizes, conceptualizes the phenomenon of the church in the language which is available at a particular moment of time, to a particular context, to a particular group of people, and it grasps, it captures only a part of the church's reality. It cannot capture the entire church's reality, because the church is, well, the church on the one hand is us, On the other hand, the church is always bigger than us, bigger than any single individual, any single member of the church. And we as members of the church can rationalize the church only partially. Only a part of the church can be really explained and articulated as a piece of theology, a piece of ecclesiology. Therefore, essentially, the self-awareness of the church is a set of theories, including hypotheses, including our suggestions, presuppositions about the church, what the church is. And those ideas, as I said, so they capture only a part of the ecclesial reality. That's why we can always add to what has been said about the church. It's not always that, it's not possible to articulate a sort of ecclesiology which would be exhausting, which would be like, you said it and nothing else can be added to that. It's not like that. Every time something else can be added to what we believe, what we say about the church. And it creates a huge space for creative theological work, for theological reflections. We can always say it again, say it anew, say it freshly about the experience that, well, generations before us lived and the generations after us will live. But this experience can be expressed in very different ways. I call these reflections, how they change, the changeability of the reflections, or the dynamics of reflections upon the church, meta-ecclesiology. Well, it's kind of my term. You may disagree with it, and it's absolutely fine if you disagree with this. And but this is the way how I kind of describe the dynamics, the changeability of the ecclesiological theories, the theories about the church. And I try to capture some of those theories in this book, in the book that we will study in our class. It's called Meta-ecclesiology, this one. Meta-ecclesiology Chronicles on Church Awareness. This book is available in our library, but with limited copies. So you can use it either from our library, you can borrow either electronically or physically this book from the library, or you can just get your book on your own. So this book captures like the changing ecclesiological theories, how the ideas about the church evolved from centuries to centuries, depending on the historical circumstances. Okay. That's one book. And there is another angle that we will focus upon, or from which we will see the church. It's the angle of the church structures that also change. Not just ideas about the church change, but also the way how the church is organized. It is changed. And I call this this organization of the church, the way how the church is organized, I call it structures of the church. I differentiate the structures of the church from the nature of the church. It's very similar to how we differentiate between what we think about the church and what the church is. Or in other words, there is a difference between what we think about the church and what God thinks about the church. So what God thinks about the church is unchangeable. What we think about the church is changeable. Well, in the same way, the way how God is present in the church is unchangeable. The way how we build our own structures, ecclesial structures around this, is changeable. And the structures we build around the church, it's called scaffolding. You know, when they build a building, they put scaffolding around to climb and to make construction work to the building. And that's exactly what we do in the church by building different structures. And there are many of them historically, like dioceses, patriarchates, autocephalous churches, um, councils. All those things are structures that we build as human beings in order to, to help God to make this his church shine, to make his church accomplish its mission. So it's a sort of synergy that we have, synergy between God and human beings in building the structure of the church in the best possible way. However, as human beings, we fail, we make mistakes, we make miscalculations, and we sometimes damage the church instead of helping the church. We misplace the pieces of scaffoldings. Sometimes scaffoldings can just collapse, can be broken, and that's how the ecclesial structures demonstrate their imperfection. And not a single structure is perfect in the church, as not a single theory about the church is comprehensive, is embracing the entire church. So not a single structure is perfect in the sense that it can serve perfectly the nature of the church. All structures fail, and our job is to repair them, sometimes to substitute them with new structures, or just to abandon them if they don't function anymore. So that's another aspect of the of ecclesiology that I explored in a different book, a second book. It's called Scaffolds of the Church. You see with the scaffolds on the cover, actual scaffolding on the cover, and we will study this aspect of ecclesiology as well in our course. So we see that at least two aspects of the church evolved all the time: the self-awareness of the church, the ecclesiological theories, and the ecclesial structures. And we will focus on those two evolutions within the church in our course. There's another thing which is important: how we deal with the imperfections, how we deal with the imperfections of our knowledge about the church. And as we said, our knowledge about the church is imperfect, and how we deal with the imperfection of the church's structures. This is also different and different from the inchangeability and imperfection of the church per se. We deal with the imperfections by actually realizing them, by acknowledging that no one is perfect in the church, by acknowledging that not a single structure in the church is perfect and fully 100% functionable. And we acknowledge this by an intellectual reflection, by a sort of approach to ecclesiology, which we in our school call critical ecclesiology. This is a brand of our school. If you want critical ecclesiology, it's something that we focus with other colleagues, such as, for example, Michael Hjelm, the dean of the school, who has written another book, which we will study. It's called Liberation of the Church, Liberation of the Ecclesia. This is his doctoral dissertation, which he defended at Uppsala University. And, well, I had a chance to be his opponent, actually, in this defense. I read this book, I read this dissertation, and I urge you to read it. You are supposed to read it as a part of your studies. And this is another book that explores the way of emancipation within the church. Emancipation is a process of repairing, as a process of readjusting the church in accordance with its divine nature. And this is a critical work. This is a work of the critical ecclesiology. And because critique is very academic, it's very pertinent to a university, to the university studies. That's very appropriate for us to do this critical work within our own course, within our own line of studies in our class. That's why the kind of overarching method of our studies in this course will be critical ecclesiology. So our ecclesiology is critical, will be critical here. And it is because the church that we will study is evolving. We will study the evolving parts, sides of the aspects of the church. And because they evolve, they change, and they are criticable. They are susceptible to critique that we need to apply in a very constructive way, not destructively, but constructively, in the way that will help rebuilding, those falling and damaged structures in the surrounding the church, those scaffoldings that help keeping the church intact.